Welcome to the Readout Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Welchins. And here's a quote you've never heard anyone say. You know, I'm just really content being mediocre. Yet so many of us don't see the forces pulling us to be just that, mediocre. Today we're talking about the book that will teach you to murder mediocrity. Be careful. If you apply this book, you may leave a trail of dead mediocrity in your wake, never to rise again. At Readout, our belief is that to lead out, you have to read out. And to read out means to read well and to read broadly. Almost every great leader in history has been a reader. And we wholeheartedly agree with Margaret Fuller when she said, "Today a reader, tomorrow a leader." Reading is not optional to leadership. It's not the side dish. It's the main course. And in order to become a great leader, you have to dig in. But here's the problem. We here at Readout know that in this day and age, time and energy is hard to come by. My hope is to save you that time and energy and bring you the reviews of the best books that can have an impact in your life right now. Then I want to teach you to get the most out of these books so that you can become the leader you've always dreamed of being faster than you ever imagined. Our dream is to create a movement of young adults passionate about reading and dangerously effective at leading. This week, we're continuing the Readout Podcast with a series called Gateway Books. We put a lot of work into selecting the books that will help you develop a serious book addiction, if not cataclysmic, full-blown book dependency. To be really straightforward, our hope with this series is to get you hooked. We're wanting you to imagine a life where your first inclination in your free time is to pick up a book and read it. With these 4 books, we want to help you develop a full-blown book addiction. And I hope by the end of this series, you can't help yourself and that you've lost control and that all you can do is feed the addiction. The late professor, David Foster Wallace, once gave a speech at the commencement of Kenyon College. He titled the speech, "This is Water." In this speech, he describes 2 fish swimming through the ocean together. They're having a great time in their daily commute until an older fish stops them and poses a question. He looks at the 2 younger fish and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" The 2 fish swim off confused. And after a minute of internal processing, one of the younger fish looks at the other and finally says, "What the heck is water?" Here was David Foster's larger point. We're the fish. The fish has spent his whole life swimming through the water, yet has no idea what water is. In humans, we're masters of living a life in default mode. We go about day to day as thousands of forces influence and shape us without ever taking notice. In his great book, The Common Rule, Justin Earley simplifies this massive problem and says the water David Foster Wallace is describing is simply our habits. Known or unknown, our habits are the main force shaping who we are becoming. A shocking study out of Duke found that 40% of your daily actions are a result of habit. That means almost half of what you do is not a conscious decision. You've kicked into autopilot and you don't even know it. Rather, your brain is programmed to take over in the form of habit, either good or bad. Here's the truth. If we ever want to be leaders, we have to use this to our advantage. We cannot let our unconscious habits be less than excellent. I talk to young, aspiring leaders all the time who all give me the same reason on why they don't read enough, and it invariably sounds something like this. I don't have time, and I understand why they feel that way. But here are 3 habits that I think are truly preventing you from developing an amazing reading habit. Number 1, your phone habit. Did you know the average Gen Z person spends 4 hours on their phone a day? No matter how you cut it, that's a lot of time. That's almost 60 days a year on your phone. Whoa. Let's pretend you took one of those hours a day and spent it reading. If you're an average reader, guess how many books that would shake out to? Just 1 hour would lead to you reading over 72 books a year. That's incredible. I've never read that many books in a year, and that is super challenging. The second habit preventing you from developing an amazing reading habit is this: your entertainment habit. Gen Z spends almost 3 hours a day watching videos online, and I get it, they're addictive. The rabbit hole never ends, right? You go from one video to the next. I've been there many times. I've had many nights where I've said, I'm just going to check one thing. Boom, 2 hours gone, and it's midnight. And I've eaten a whole bag of Doritos and watched about 300 videos on YouTube, right? That's what I do. It's my favorite method of escape. And sadly for many, it's the water they're swimming in. The third habit preventing you from developing an amazing reading habit is this: your sleep habits. Maybe you've thought about this, maybe you haven't. But we live in an exhausted generation. Constant technological stimuli keep our attention far longer than they should. We sleep less than ever before in the entire history of the world, and the quality of sleep we receive is far worse than it should be. I've heard from many that they'd love to read, but the moment they pick up a book, they're out. They're exhausted. They fall asleep. And I get it. Reading is a very relaxing habit. But if we're going to become readers, we have to have the energy to read. We can't read without habits that leave us refreshed and energized every single day. These are 3 of many habits keeping us from the path of becoming excellent readers and leaders. If we're ever going to make time for reading, we've got to do a habit makeover. And here's the deal. I've tried and failed for years to develop great habits. It seemed that every time I committed to something new, I'd do well for a couple days, maybe even some hours, and then fall right back to the default me. I'd just be swimming in the water. I couldn't take any ground, and it drove me crazy. If you're like me, maybe you've experienced the same frustration. I had nearly given up on developing any meaningful habits, but then I found a truly life-changing book. It's called Atomic Habits. And if you want to develop a serious reading habit, there is no better place to start. This book was written by the incredible James Clear. He is a preeminent expert on habits, but guess what? He didn't start that way. He started off as a young adult, like many of you, trying to get the most out of life, but failing to do so. Through years of experience, research, and practice, he's found the secrets to developing habits. If you apply this book, you will be able to develop lifelong, game-changing habits that will lead you far away from the life of mediocrity so many fall into. Here's some leadership gold by him. Listen to this passage from his book. In Chapter 1, The Surprising Power of Atomic Habits, this is what he says. Prevailing wisdom claims that the best way to achieve what we want in life, getting into better shape, building a successful business, relaxing more and worrying less, spending more time with friends and family, is to set specific, actionable goals. For many years, this was how I approached my habits too. Each one was a goal to be reached. I set goals for the grades I wanted to get in school, for the weights I wanted to lift in the gym, for the profits I wanted to earn in business. I succeeded at a few, but I failed at a lot of them. Eventually, I began to realize that my results had very little to do with the goals I set and nearly everything to do with the systems I followed. What's the difference between system and goals? It's a distinction I first learned from Scott Adams, the cartoonist behind the Dilbert comic. Goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you're a coach, your goal might be to win a championship. Your system is the way to recruit players, manage assistant coaches, and conduct practice. If you're an entrepreneur, your goal might be to build $1 million business. Your system is how you test product ideas, hire employees, and run marketing campaigns. If you're a musician, your goal might be to play a new piece. Your system is how often you practice, how you break down and tackle difficult measures, and your method for receiving feedback from your instructor. Man, I love that passage. It was game-changing for me to learn the difference between the goals I was setting and the systems that led to those results. It changed everything for me. And if you pick up this book, I want to give you a couple shortcuts to greatness. And again, every week at Readout, we're going to break down the books we review and recommend some shortcuts to greatness. In other words, if you read this book, these are the 2 to 3 things that will give you the most bang for your buck. Check them out. This week's shortcuts to greatness are this. Number 1, identity. One theme of Atomic Habits is the idea of identity, and it's incredibly important in developing the habits of leaders. James Clear makes the point that actions are not as important as identity. The way you view yourself has a direct impact on the actions you take each day, not the other way around. So in order to change our habits, we have to change the way we view ourselves. If you want to become a reader, you must view yourself as a reader. And the way you begin viewing yourself as a reader is through consistently doing things that readers do until you see yourself as a reader. Anytime he talks about developing good identities, please tune in. It's absolute gold. The second shortcut to greatness is this: habit contracts. And this one's specific to me. One specific suggestion he makes, which has helped me a lot, is the idea of habit contracts. It's a short concept in his book, but man, it has paid huge dividends in my life. The idea of a habit contract is to create a binding contract with some people who you trust and who will hold you accountable. Come up with 2 to 3 habits you'd like to follow through on and send them to your accountability. They will then sign this accountability, and any infraction of this contract will result in a negative consequence you have to follow through on. Mine is I have to pay $10 each time I break one of my habits on this contract. I have 2 people I really trust hold me accountable, and they're great at it. This has been a game changer for my development of good habits. Please try it out. In order to become a reader, you have to develop the reading habit. This is not easy, but if you can pull this off, the rest will largely take care of itself. Literally. If you develop the reading habit, your life will start to change in countless positive ways while you're putting in less and less energy along the way. James Clear, in his book Atomic Habits, will help you do just that. Do yourself a favor and pick it up soon as you can, and start killing the mediocrity in your life. As we continue this series, we're going to bring you 2 more books that we believe will help you become a devoted book junkie. Join me next week as we reveal book number 3 of Gateway Books. Remember, life is too short for bad books. My name's Jake Welchins, and to see what I'm reading right now, follow me on Instagram at Jake Welchins or on my Goodreads profile at www.goodreads.com/Jake Welchins. This podcast is brought to you by the Launchpad Podcast Collection and performed and written by myself, Jake Welchins. Podcast production is by the one and only Logan Bonjean. See you next time on Read Out.